But first, I've got Gary Jordan of Jordan Wine Estate in Stellenbosch with me in the studio. And we're here to talk Stellenbosch Cabernet. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Fantastic, Tom, and great to be able to be here and bring a little bit of our sunny South Africa with me to be able to come and chat to you about these cabs.
It's an absolute joy to have you, and thank you so much. We're going to taste one of your wines, which is going to be an anchor piece, and that's really important. You've also brought some brilliant rocks, but we're going to run through a number of different wines from the region. I think that's that's the key thing here. So today you're here as the ambassador for your region, I suppose.
Yeah, for Stellenbosch Cabernet Collective, a great group of wine estates, all from different regions of Stellenbosch, and it's going to be interesting to get to the nitty-gritty of what lies and what makes up Stellenbosch, what makes it so interesting.
So I think that's key, and this is exactly it. So Stellenbosch, viewers will be very familiar with Stellenbosch, and will be familiar with the fantastic Bordeaux-esque blends coming out of there, and Cape blends as well, bringing pinotage into it that people like Canoncop have been so sort of pivotal in. But I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is I did a tasting recently with the collective, and the regional diversity and I suppose the kind of the move to really sort of celebrating the terroir of each of those individual regions and begin to communicate about it really kind of struck me. And so it's both geographical, isn't it? There's a huge amount of maritime influence in some parts, greater and lesser, and there's a lot of hills and mountains, and there's lots of altitude and bits and bobs going on. So there's a lot of diversity. Let's start with, I'm going to pour the first wine and we can kind of taste as we go, but tell me a little bit about Stellenbosch as a history. How long is the region? The region is the most important, arguably, wine-producing region in South Africa. But where did it start? What's the trajectory in the history of the region?
Yeah, I think when you look back to the first vines being planted in the 1800s, that was quite different to what the Dutch were planting already in the 1600s. In 1685, when Stellenbosch was first farmed, things were quite different then in those days, and it was much more sort of a survival and supplying ships that came into Table Bay.
100%.
By the 1800s, once the English had taken over the Cape, there was much more of a focus on quality wines.
Yes.
Starting off with Constantia, and of course then Stellenbosch, a larger region and more diverse soils brought that into it.
And so this is it. And so from that basis, a star of the region was born, and Cabernet arrives alongside Pinotage, obviously, which is still hugely important.
Which was more recent,
the region, exactly. But Cabernet has got this obviously incredible ability to communicate place, right? It is such a great varietal in terms of being able to do that. And so with that diversity, of the region, I mean, Cabernet is the perfect platform to kind of, stand up and pronounce this from, surely. Should we talk geology?
It is.
Tell me about, you've got a rock in your hands.
I have, but
for one reason or another.
It's quite interesting because we started planting vineyards here before the Dutch drained Bordeaux.
That's a very good point. This is
and,
it.
And people forget the history and how far back it goes. But it kind of all went back 600 million years back when you look at this granite, which kind of pushed up through the earth as the continents were pulling and pushing apart before Australia left and went and did their own thing. Before India formed the Himalayas, before Antarctica disappeared. This was formed and forms the basis of what is mostly Stellenbosch. And of course under Table Mountain and Paarl Rock, etc. Large feldspar crystals, really coarse-grained granite, as you can see. Creating this wonderful environment that we have for our vines to grow. And
And when we talk about so some of the oldest soils in the world, producing wine on, this is what we're looking at.
This is 10 times older than anything you find in Napa Valley, for instance.
Amazing, isn't that amazing?
And most people don't realise how the soil affects it dramatically.
And so with that, there's regions which have far more granite than others, and others have elements that have kind of come down from mountains and have eroded, and so tell us a little bit more. What else have we got knocking about under the soil?
So you can see the two, right? Mm-hmm. Rocks, both granite. They look quite different. Much more recent. This pushed up, and there's areas of Stellenbosch, and we're going to be tasting through some of these, which then have this fine-grained granite. Analytically, exactly the same. Look how different
texturally, entirely
different.
This is
so what Stellenbosch Cab is structure and texture. And that structure and texture you get from these differences
Is based
in the granite.
Amazing, 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 amazing. Wine number one, we'll go through.
Yeah.
So this is Larish. And Larish, I tasted in this tasting and I just thought was fantastic. And the reason we're going first is this is a pretty good, I would say, benchmark basis for bringing fruit from across Stellenbosch and bringing in those different characteristics into one wine. And this has got everything that I would expect and anticipate from a great Cabernet from Stellenbosch. It's got amazing bright fruit. It's got wonderful acidity.
Yeah.
Really kind of, bracing fresh acidity that sits behind it, which I think often people wouldn't have first in mind. And there's that density of fruit, that intensity of flavour. It's an absolutely lovely wine. What would you say? Is there anything else that really hallmarks and benchmarks Stellenbosch as a region? Is that sort of it?
I think Larish really helped put Cabernet on the map in the old days when Christo's dad was really, his heart and soul was in Cabernet. That was one of his wines that he really liked to make. And this is kind of what they do now. They specialise with Cab.
Exactly.
And really good because they're able to bring in grapes from different parts of Stellenbosch to kind of have those nuanced little flavours.
It's an amazing wine, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful style of wine, and a wonderful platform for us to then kind of reach out and start talking about individual vineyards and regional typicity. So let's do Simonsburg. Okay. And so this is sort of the far north, right, of Stellenbosch. So we're pouring Cannon Cop here.
Yeah, so this is kind of on the edge of Stellenbosch in the Simonsburg area. A little warmer. It's further from the sea. Little less rain than some of the other producers. Wonderful focus though, and old vines, and that's the big difference. So quite a lot of them are would be bush vines. Relatively high up. I mean, you get fantastic views of Cape Town, but it's those deep red clay loam soils that really make a big difference.
And I always think of this as kind of the powerhouse in terms of regions, right?
Yeah.
And so this is bringing that kind of the base note to the blends. It is the kind of the riper, fuller, richer fruit that comes from Simonsburg. And I mean, this is exactly it. But there's aromatics. There's beautiful, lovely aromatics that's running across the top of this. And it's such a kind of generous, full style of wine.
You shut your eyes, you could think you're in Bordeaux.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Exactly that. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so a real classic. That's quite a long way inland. I suppose the maritime influence is far lesser there. It's a little bit warmer. And that maritime influence, as well as we've talked to soil a little bit and the key differences that's going to create in texture, maritime influence is a big deal in terms of the different vineyard regions within Stellenbosch. And so, we're probably going to go from one that is quite a long way inland to another actually that's quite a long way inland. By the time we get to yours, I think the Jordan wines maritime influence is a bigger deal, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant factor. Let's move over to...
And you can see that on the wine too.
Exactly. Let's move over to Oldenburg. And
yeah.
Oh, hello. Look at that. There's a rock on the ground.
All right.
And this is about, I think, as continental a climate as you get within Stellenbosch. Is this right?
It would be. It's totally enclosed by the mountains itself. So in the Bunhoek area. So as you're driving towards Franschhoek from Stellenbosch, you go over the pass. You're literally surrounded by these massive mountains.
Yeah.
There's something quite special about this property though, because it's a kind of little valley that you don't really know too much about.
When I tasted this in the tasting, I loved it, and I thought there's so much elegance and tension and poise, and this really is a kind of quite tense, lighter in many ways kind of style of Cabernet that I found. And I think the wines are absolutely glorious. You made a brilliant point just before we started about vintage, and this is probably a factor to bring in here.
It's the youngest vintage, 2019. So you must remember the 2018 that we started with was kind of the fourth year that we really had this really dry conditions. For those people who visited South Africa during that time will remember that there were water restrictions, etc. Except for Stellenbosch, of course. But Cape Town itself had water restrictions.
Plenty of.
But we all needed to play our part.
Carried on. Yeah. This is it. And then 19 was the break of that. In many ways. That was the thing.
Back to a more normal vintage.
I love it.
better rain. Nick Van Ard is a great winemaker, and here you get what I'm talking about: this fruit, the texture, the structure.
The fruit is totally at the fore in a way that there is this generosity and richness to both these previous two. This is a much more kind of fruit forward, bright, blackcurranty kind of lead style. And the tannins got this lovely chew to them on the finish. The others, it's sort of slightly mellowed and softened.
Right.
This has got this kind of chewy tannin. It's great.
Yeah. So probably the youngest vines of the lot as well. These are 17 years old, whereas most of the others would be in the 30s.
Okay, perfect. Now, I'm going to move over to one of your wines, which is fantastic. And so this is the Long Fuse. We're going back to 2018, so this is the last of those 5 years of drought, of real water stress, right? And this is Polka Dry. Is this right?
That's right. So when you land at Cape Town Airport and the southeast is blowing, look left. And the very first vineyards that you see from the plane towards Stellenbosch, that's us.
That's you.
Our entrance is on the Stellenbosch side, but north facing for us is where we plant our cab. The photograph that we were looking at was taken looking south towards the Cabernet vineyards on the far hill.
And that's where they are, is it there?
I wouldn't be able to ripen Cabernet where I took that photograph. On one property, you can have that difference, let alone from property to property. So it's quite interesting.
I love it. We've got a photograph of that as well. And so Chenin Blanc is where you take that photo from. That's the Chenin, right? And that's it. And could you show us the photo? Go on. Let's get it out. Let's get it up and show it to people. Here we go. Nice.
So this kind of gives you an idea. Most of the producers we're talking about in Stellenbosch. Cape Town Airport here in Cape Town. This is Jordan Estate in front, but we're looking at Larish down in the valley over there.
Over this way.
Yeah. Kanonkop to the left of us. And then just slightly over that hill, that's where the Oldenburg is, nestled in the mountains there. So here you can see 14 kilometers to the ocean.
It's amazing.
That's kind of the Indian Ocean side, and 24 kilometers to Table Bay.
So you see both sets of water
at the same time.
And that maritime influence, is that what makes this? Thank you so much. Is that what makes this as elegant as it is? There's wonderful blackcurrant leaf. There's this kind of bouquet of aromatics to it. And then I know, because I tasted it literally the other day, again, there's a lot of what I'm finding here in the Oldenburg, there's lovely tension. There's this great kind of concentration of fruit, but tension is key. Is that typical of your, Cabernet Sauvignon that's grown where you are?
Very much, and that's why Cab Franc does well as in this area. It's an extremely good area for cab-based blends too. So
they are lovely, lovely wines, and the balance there and the finish of it is just, again, there's this softness and this subtleness and this elegance, but a very, very, very complete picture. I was blown away with it. I think Stellenbosch is so well known by winos, guys who are into it in the UK, but I think actually beginning to sort of lift the lid on it a little bit and delve into different regional, styles, there's a lot to be done with it, as with everything in wine.
You can spend weeks in Stellenbosch discovering the different regions.
I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to come and get stuck into it, because it is, I think there is such distinct and diverse differences between each of those wines. I implore any viewers, get stuck into it. Get yourself a nice little lineup like this. And these are all readily available and easily found in the UK. Yeah. And I think they produce great value wines. This is, they are premium wines. They are extraordinarily complex and just wonderful density and tension, as I say. But value for money, I think they're fantastic.
They certainly brighten up your Christmas.
Oh, it's fantastic for Christmas. Gary, thank you so much for your time. Bless you. It's absolutely lovely to have you on.